The dark side of living in Japan. Japan is often portrayed as a paradise, but there are some darker aspects of living in the country that many people don't know about. From its xenophobic culture to the lack of mental health awareness, Japan has some unique issues that can make life difficult for those who live there. This article will discuss these dark sides and how they impact those who call Japan their home. We'll explore topics such as the difficulty of finding long-term employment, discrimination against foreign nationals, and the stigma surrounding mental illness in Japanese society. By understanding these realities faced by many people living in Japan today, we can gain insight into an important part of this fascinating country's history and culture. 1. The culture is entirely different. Living in Japan is a unique experience, as the culture is entirely different from what most Westerners are used to. Japanese people tend to be more reserved and polite than those in Western countries, and their customs can take some getting used to. For instance, bowing is an important gesture of respect that's seen frequently throughout Japan. Additionally, it's not uncommon for conversations between strangers to remain relatively formal until they become comfortable with one another. Furthermore, there are certain behaviors which are considered taboo in Japan, such as being loud or talking on your phone while riding public transportation. It can also be difficult to find places open late at night due to the fact that many businesses close early in order to adhere to traditional customs. While living in Japan can be a rewarding experience, it's important to be aware of the cultural differences and respect the local customs. 2. High rent. One of the dark sides of living in Japan is the high rent for tiny flats. With limited land available and high demand for housing in popular areas, the cost of living in a metropolitan area like Tokyo can be incredibly expensive. Even small apartments can command high rent prices, leaving little disposable income for other things. Space is a precious commodity in Japan, and many apartments are designed to be functional rather than spacious, leading to cramped living conditions for some. Living in a small apartment may be tolerable for some people, but high rents can add to the stress of daily life. Renting a larger apartment can be an option, but it comes with an even higher price tag. While living in Japan can offer many advantages, the high cost of housing is an issue that potential residents should be aware of before making the move. 3. Smoking is allowed in public spaces. Smoking is allowed in public spaces in Japan. This has a negative side to it, as those who do not smoke are exposed to the dangers of secondhand smoking. For example, when walking down a busy street or sitting at an outdoor cafe, it's common to be surrounded by people smoking cigarettes and other tobacco products. The air quality can suffer from the influx of cigarette smoke, making the environment unhealthy for non-smokers. Additionally, many restaurants and cafes have designated smoking areas that can be difficult for non-smokers to avoid if they want to enjoy their meal or beverage without having someone puffing away next door. There have been attempts made by some cities like Tokyo and Osaka to ban smoking indoors, but these efforts have mostly fallen flat due to lack of enforcement or public outcry against such regulations. As long as this remains unchanged, living in Japan will be synonymous with being exposed to the dangers of secondhand smoke. 4. The suicide rate is high. Japan's unusually high suicide rates paint a very dark picture about the place. According to the World Health Organization, Japan has one of the highest suicide rates among developed countries. Suicide has long been a serious social problem in Japan, with various factors contributing to the issue, including cultural pressures to conform, social isolation, and financial difficulties. There is a strong cultural stigma around mental health and seeking professional help, which can exacerbate the problem. The Japanese government has taken steps to address the issue, including implementing suicide prevention programs, but there is still much work to be done. For individuals living in Japan, the high suicide rate can be a source of stress and anxiety, and it is important to be aware of resources available for mental health support and crisis intervention. 5. The cost of living is extremely high. Living in Japan can be expensive. The cost of everyday items like food, clothing, and transportation are all much higher than average. Renting or buying a home is especially costly due to the high demand for housing in cities such as Tokyo and Osaka. Groceries tend to be more expensive compared to other countries, with imported goods having a particularly hefty price tag attached. Eating out is also pricey. Even fast food meals can cost up to double what they would elsewhere in the world. Transportation fares are some of the highest globally too. It's not uncommon for people commuting into larger cities from suburban areas to pay thousands of yen each month on train tickets alone. With so many expenses involved with living in Japan, it's important that anyone considering making the move researches their finances thoroughly before doing so. 6. There's a lot of paperwork. Living in Japan can be bureaucratic, with a significant amount of paperwork required for various tasks. This includes getting a visa, registering your residency, opening a bank account, and even buying a cell phone. The language barrier can make navigating the paperwork even more challenging, and the procedures can be confusing and time-consuming. Even simple tasks like changing your address require filling out multiple forms and visiting different offices. The amount of paperwork required can be overwhelming, especially for those who are not fluent in Japanese. Additionally, certain legal procedures can be complicated and require the assistance of a lawyer. Overall, the amount of paperwork required to live and work in Japan can be a frustrating and time-consuming process, and it is important to be patient and diligent when dealing with those bureaucratic procedures. 7. You will never be Japanese. Living in Japan can be an exciting and rewarding experience, but there is a dark side to it as well. One of the biggest issues facing foreigners who live in Japan is that they will never truly be Japanese. While you may learn the language, customs and culture, most people will always see you as an outsider due to your foreign background. This can lead to feelings of isolation from locals and difficulty fitting into society. Additionally, some places have restrictions on what foreigners can do or even when they are allowed to go based on their nationality or ethnicity. These factors contribute to making life for non-Japanese living in Japan difficult and often discouraging. Although many people manage to make successful lives here despite these challenges, it is important to recognize that sometimes being different makes it hard for you to fit into a new country, no matter how much effort you put forth. 8. Earthquakes and tsunamis. Japan is a country located on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a region known for its high seismic activity. Earthquakes and tsunamis are common occurrences in Japan, and the country has a long history of dealing with natural disasters. The frequent earthquakes can be unsettling for those who are not used to them, and the possibility of a devastating earthquake or tsunami is a constant concern. Many buildings and infrastructure in Japan are built to withstand earthquakes, but it is still a significant risk, and residents are encouraged to prepare emergency kits and make evacuation plans. The Fukushima disaster in 2011, caused by a massive earthquake and tsunami, had a lasting impact on the country and the world. While Japan has made significant strides in disaster preparedness and response, the risk of earthquakes and tsunamis remains a dark side of living in Japan. 9. Renting can be difficult for foreigners. Living in Japan can be a great experience for many, but there is also a darker side to consider. One of these issues is the difficulty that foreigners face when it comes to renting property. Although Japan has relaxed its immigration laws and regulations over the years, foreign nationals are still often discriminated against in terms of housing. Despite having all necessary documentation, such as visas and work permits, many landlords are unwilling to rent their properties out to non-Japanese citizens due to cultural differences or language barriers. This means that finding affordable rental accommodation can be an uphill battle for those from abroad who choose to live in Japan. 10. It's far from home and expensive. Living in Japan can be isolating, especially for those who are not familiar with the language and culture. The country is also geographically isolated, being an island nation, which can make it difficult and expensive to travel to other parts of the world. For foreigners, the distance from their home country and the feeling of being far away from loved ones can be a significant challenge. Japan is a great place to live, but it has its own unique challenges. It's important to be aware of the potential difficulties you may face when living in Japan so that you can make informed decisions and better prepare yourself for the experience. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to comment, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell.